Hi, I'm Eve and I use she, her pronouns.
And I'm Harnoor and I use he, her pronouns.
We are Novel Youth Ambassadors today, joined by Alyson Stoner, she, they, founder of Movement Genius and author of several books, including Mind, Body, Pride. Alyson, I am so excited to be able to chat with you today, and we at Novelly are really grateful for your support, and we're very glad to have you. I have to confess that we did both stalk you on social media a bit. And I want to start out by saying that I actually just love your style. You have the best outfits. And also, like, you're wearing hoops. You all can't see, but she's wearing hoops. I'm wearing hoops. So we've got that partnership going on there. But you have a platform that you really use in a way that too many people don't, and then more that can't, that don't have that platform. And apart from your iconic style, you use it for your advocacy, and not in a passive way either. Like mental and physical health, especially the mental and physical health of queer women, is always understated and stigmatized. And you're actively working to combat that. You knew what was at stake when you publicly came out, and you know what's at stake for queer people, in particular youth and women, every day. Like you're fighting, speaking up, and speaking out anyway, and that is very admirable.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for quite an introduction. And I'm glad that I chose to wear my hoops because I often bypass all jewelry and accessorizing. So glad to be in the hoop crew tonight.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you've said. It's super cool to meet you. I've watched some of your movies, I think, but mostly I know you from Instagram and TikTok. It was so funny, actually. Like, we got told that we were doing an interview with you, and then almost immediately I went to my For You page, and then you showed up, and I was like, huh, odd coincidence. I bet they're listening. Um, and I just love the super positive messages you spread using your platform and all of the work you do with Movement Genius. I think a lot of times the mind and body are seen as really separate things, but as somebody who's experienced symptoms from my mental health that are very much physical, I know personally how important that connection is. And I also like looked at your coming out story, which was so beautifully written, and I loved it so much. And we'll talk about it a little bit more later. But as a fellow queer person, I just think it's so admirable how you took control of your coming out story and wrote it yourself, and you wrote it beautifully. And I'm just very excited to talk with you today.
Thank you, and I'm really looking forward to being able to discuss books and authorship and writing because oftentimes interviews are focused on other skill sets, and at the heart of my artistry and intention to serve, words and ideas were always my closest friends growing up, and the way that I actually went about my healing journey. So it feels like a full circle moment to be able to chat about being an author of material that's supporting other people and improving their mental health.
That's amazing, and thank you again for being here today. So, my first question for you recently, again, we've got the stalking on social media. You started learning a new skill. You chose guitar instead of scrolling on social media. And I love that idea. I think it's very cool that you're using your platform on social media to advocate for less of it. Like, that's very cool. And I've actually started doing it myself. And you mentioned that you love words and you love writing. Um, those are also things that definitely do happen a lot on a device, but something that I think is really cool is that they can happen anywhere too. And that's my new thing that I've started doing outside of social media, is like writing or on a journal or even on a napkin if that's the only thing closer to me. So, how's your progress been in like developing this new skill, not just of guitar, but like of establishing healthier habits in general in replacement of more detrimental ones?
That is a great question. I think what has been most exciting is when you identify something enjoyable as a replacement, it's no longer just about trying to fix a problem or feeling frustrated that you're stuck in a rut. Instead, you have this opportunity always present to add more joy to your day, to learn a new skill that is fulfilling and that, might end up shaping my artistic contributions to the world someday. And I think there's something that happens internally when you feel like you're being pulled forward by inspiration as opposed to pushed from behind towards something that may or may not, feel like you're in the mood to do it at any given time. So I think it's been really helpful to remind myself this is a gift. This is something that is enhancing your human experience. There's no one forcing you to do it. You, of your own choice, can make this decision whenever you want. And not only is it, really fun and interesting for me to be able to figure out chords, but it's also exciting to think about how I'll be able to interact with people in new ways. If there is a language barrier or there are other communication difficulties, music is such a beautiful universal language and way to, go beyond the verbal, go beyond even body language, and just like right to the heart of how that chord feels, or that melody sits in your body and your mind. So um, I think it's still a temptation to open my phone, but I'm at least now aware of when I'm finding myself scrolling mindlessly. And I think overall, I've spent less time on my phone, and I've felt my mental health improve noticeably. So 10 out of 10 recommend. Pick a skill or something that you've been wanting to learn anyway, and then switch that time and go try the skill instead of scrolling. And then a month from now or a year from now, like, post an update so that social media can be a little time capsule and you can see, like, oh my gosh, it's okay to use social media. And I'm so glad that I got off my phone because, like, now I can shred on the guitar.
Yeah, I've been wanting to pick up a guitar forever because I'm big into like music, especially like the folkier music that people that do with just like an acoustic guitar. And that's I saw you and I was like, this summer I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get a guitar and I'm gonna not be on Instagram for like an hour a day. And I also think, like you were saying, awareness is such a big deal when it comes to interacting with social media. Like one of my favorite things are those little like checkpoint posts or that are like, do you still want to be scrolling, or like go get a glass of water, because it sort of like makes you mindful of how you're using your time or if it's actually beneficial to you, because I do think that social media can provide community, but then there's also ways that we use it that can be damaging, and it's just important to be, like I said, like mindful in how you use it, and be sort of aware of what you're doing, because it is like designed to be addictive. It's designed to keep you engaged, and just to be like, okay, do I still want to be doing this? Am I having a good time? Are really
Right.
important questions to ask.
And also,
And
what's
speaking
your
of,
feed looking like? Like, how can you unfollow certain accounts and follow other accounts where you're choosing to expose yourself to helpful information? Like, I've learned so much from different creators online, and thankfully, many of them will have posts to remind me to get off my phone as well. So there is a balance of really appreciating the lessons that I'm learning, um, and enjoying the time scrolling, and then also, like you said, building that awareness. So it's something that's going to be a part of our lives, and there are measurable effects on our well-being that really we need to pay attention to. And so I think, understanding that technology can contribute to us being a bit more disconnected from our bodies, our embodied experience. Even just knowing that, can help us feel empowered to use it as a tool, and then also see like the shadow sides. Sometimes tech is a really helpful distraction, or we need to escape from something that's overwhelming. And let's make sure that we don't choose escapism every time, that we forget how to interact with ourselves and the world, right? We don't want to lose our resilience. We want to feel empowered, like we're consciously using it as a tool, not being controlled by it. So, I'm definitely for a mindful relationship as opposed to throwing it into one category or another.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I follow a lot of artists on Instagram, and I think that like one of my favorite things is just seeing like super cool art and sending it to my friends and like being like, I'd love to get this as a tattoo someday. Just like stuff like that, conversations like that, seeing like all of the wonderful things that people make. And, people say that like if you're just sort of scrolling and looking through, a bunch of like posts and stuff, often like that's kind of harmful. But some of the greatest like conversations I've had with my friends, especially friends that I don't get to see in person a lot, have been over text, and if they've been great, and I've spent like, like half an hour just talking, chatting with somebody over DM, and it's been like a great experience, and it's been really wonderful to bring joy to my day. So yeah, I don't think it needs to necessarily be like cast off as entirely bad, because a lot of people say like, oh, just delete it all from your phone. But like, no, it provides a really wonderful sense of community, especially as like if you're belonging to a marginalized group. Like if you're the only like queer person at your high school, like the internet is an incredibly powerful source for you to be able to meet other people that are like you, right? And so in that way it can be really beneficial for mental health. So yeah, stuff is just complex. I think we need to view it as such. So you were talking about Movement Genius, which you co-founded with your sister, I believe, and it's a nonprofit that provides mental and emotional, or focuses on exercise, that focus on exercise relating to improving mental and emotional health. And I often find that like the culture around exercise can exacerbate, like unhealthy self-image or negative self-talk. And I was so happy to see something like Movement Genius, which seems radically different than the traditional like, oh, push yourself to your limit, work as hard as you can, go to the gym and like grind. And so I was wondering, how does Movement Genius harness movement as a way to improve self-confidence and mental health? And how has movement been important to you on your mental health journey?
Yes, great question. So, first, I want to clarify a few things. We are a for profit company. We are wildly affordable, as in, you can have an annual membership for less than $5 a month. So, it's nearly nonprofit. And we do have free resources on our social platforms, and we'll do free workshops for people who can't afford a membership. And it's a subscription platform that offers stress relief techniques and mental health tools and full body programs that help you reduce stress and anxiety and find calmness, and also build confidence in your skin. And a lot of times, mental health solutions only focus neck up. So things like talk therapy, medication, mindfulness, a lot of times they are administered without a full body awareness. So you might be addressing part of the issue and improving some of the problem, but if you don't understand that your body is also carrying the stress and the anxiety and your emotions, even trauma and your lived experiences, then you might not address fully the stress and the suffering. So, Movement Genius specifically makes sure we include the body. And to your point, when we say movement, we are not just talking about physical exercise or trying to push yourself to the limit. We're actually inviting you to reflect on how your body naturally moves through the world on a daily basis. During what moments do you find yourself tensing up? Or with what people, do you find you relax? And are able to expand. You're rebuilding and retraining your nervous system to be able to respond to whatever you're going through in that day and feel like you have tools to get through that and move forward. So it's a much broader definition of movement. And we have something as simple as 3 minutes, something as long as 40 minutes, and it really is, hopefully a place where people can go and say, I need to take a moment for my mental health, and it can be your go-to place. And I think one of my favorite components of Movement Genius is the community aspect. We have our library of classes that you can take anytime, and we have 4 monthly classes where real humans, no matter how you're feeling that day, if you've got tons of energy or no energy, if you're feeling blue or green or yellow, if you want to move a lot or just a little, you can show up exactly as you are, and that's enough. And you can connect with other people and just feel authentically supported. Obviously, wellness and well-being are very individual. So Movement Genius is not at all a one-size-fits-all, one destination for well-being. It's how can you understand your unique mind and body and figure out the tools that feel most supportive for you in your life. And that to me is so empowering, especially because you don't need expensive equipment. You don't need to be sold some, array of products. You don't have to go to an exclusive retreat. Like, in your own space, just your mind and your body, you can actually learn how to support yourself. And something about that for me in my own journey was like so invigorating, because for a long time I almost felt like I was a a victim to the thoughts I was having. Like I was stuck in patterns and behaviors, and I also just felt overwhelmed in a way, like I couldn't manage the stress. So I would cope in a bunch of different ways. Some of them were not very helpful. And by using these tools, I now feel like I'm able to make a conscious decision, to take care of myself, and it gets easier over time. So you see that short term benefit of like, yes, I just need a 3 minute reset. And then you start to see long term transformation where, like, I used to be self conscious about, going to certain social settings. Now my social anxiety has decreased overall. And I feel like even if it does spike, I know how to manage it with way more comfort and confidence. And then also things like my intimate relationships. I used to be so scared of really letting people in. I had like big trust issues, not just with other people, but even with my own body. Like, I did not listen if my body said, hey, we're hungry, or we're full, or we're stressed, or we need sleep. Like, I was so disconnected and dysregulated. And now, having that stronger sense of connection, my relationships are like so much more authentic, and they're deeper and they're more special. And so, you know, when we talk about taking care of our mental health on Movement Genius, it's really about tapping into feeling safe, comfortable, and confident in who you are as a whole person. And honestly, if and as we each heal and step into that personal power, you also start to see how it permeates society and shifts culture and systems. We were talking offline before about the fact that health intersects with everything. So, how can we start bringing well being into the workplace, into schools? Like, there's no reason that we should have to, suffer through finals week when you literally, as a class with your teacher, could take a 30-second break to breathe, and it would help everyone's nervous system, and you would be able to perform better. like you'd be able to answer that question with more clarity, right? Like there's no reason we're not at the Olympics in school trying to prove that we can do this without breathing. Like, so, all of this is to help us individually as well as to start shifting the collective and how we show up in the world. And if you want to try it, we have 30 days free. So you can reach out to us, join the live classes, and try out the different stress relief techniques, and then let us know how it goes. We are open ears, open mind, open heart, and it's an ongoing conversation. And if there's something that you don't see that you want, tell us. We'll make it.
That's amazing. So first of all, I'm going to make a petition for you to be my teacher, because I would love that during finals week. But also, like, just you are making this extremely affordable and accessible for a community and for a subject, mental health, that is historically very inaffordable and inaccessible. So I think that's amazing. And it's also like you talked about seeing progress and seeing these results. And it's really admirable to be able to see that you are making progress and to make steps to make progress, to put in the work. You were discouraged from prioritizing your mental health when you were a teenager, from people in the industry who were afraid that your career would lose its momentum. And now you've acknowledged many times that it was one of the best decisions of your life, and you're at a point that, like, the way that you are able to manage your mental health, or even just manage the management of it,
Mm-hmm.
is just really admirable. So how do you remind yourself to make the best choice for yourself instead of for someone or something else?
That's a great question. All of your questions are great, so I'll probably say that each time. You know, something I learned in my own recovery, it was specifically around food and exercise addiction. And I recognized that the inner critic voice was very dominant, and that the inner support system voice wasn't really something I practiced as often. And at some point, it clicked that if I was going to have these external pressures that were adding to that inner critic voice, I needed to at least match that with the inner support system voice. It had to at least equal so that I could be at a neutral at a neutral level and say, all right, who do I want to listen to today? Otherwise, the choice was almost made for me. So I think at the heart of it, I like to remember this is giving you a sense of agency over your life. This is a pathway to empowerment, to freedom, to resilience. And that tends to motivate me to frame the different decision making less as like, are you going to do the right or wrong thing? Or did you make the good or bad choice? And more as like, how amazing that this is not only going to feel good and be helpful for my health, but also over time, this problem that I've been dealing with might not actually be an issue forever. And when you're going through something specific, food or exercise or substance or anything, sometimes it feels like it's gonna be like that forever. And you can't even really imagine your life without it. And so I really try on a daily basis to like flood my mind and my surroundings with the message that I want to embody in the future. And I know that at times when you say something like a positive affirmation, your initial response to it might be like, that is garbage, or that's not true, or that's hokey. And what's interesting is we often assume that just because the thought is familiar and habitual, that it automatically means it's true. And that's not the case. So just because I've told myself 100 times that I'm one way doesn't mean I can't introduce a new possibility. I'm just going to need to say that new possibility several times before my mind actually gives it a chance to come true. So, I don't always make the quote unquote right decision or the best decision, but over the years, I've gotten way more kind in terms of, you know, when I know it wasn't the most helpful for my health, instead of wallowing in that for like days and having that set me back all the way, I go, of course, like that happens. Now, like, how, let's feel through it. What was the result of it? Do you like how you're feeling? If not, how else do you want to feel? What choice might contribute to that? And it's just a way more casual, kind approach to your transformation. And I think that that makes all the difference, because if you feel like you've got someone inside your own mind who's putting these really stressful pressures on you, and then you've got external pressures as well, like, I will just combust at some point. So, I think becoming your own ally, especially for young queer folks, people of color, people who are already given so many messages on a daily basis from media, politics, religion, different forces, and communities, as to why they are not the idealized standard, which we know is tends to be racist and sexist and ableist and all of the is. So if you're facing an increased number of messages, then we've got to up the stakes even more with the messages of self-love and acceptance. And then, of course, over time, we don't want the pressure to always just be on the individual to combat the system. We've got to take strides in our own personal lives to get active in the community, to shift the conversation, to use our voting privileges to like really see how we can treat every level of the problem. But I'll pause there because there's a lot to digest.
Literally
Yeah,
all of that.
everything you
Sorry, Harnoor.
we
I
just said
just
like
want
the exact same thing.
I just wanted to say, like, literally all of that. I'm literally taking mental notes because this is all like very genuinely important. I'm actually genuinely gonna use all that. I'm probably gonna listen to this podcast once it's out, because that was all really good advice. I'm kind of having a bit of an epiphany over here. So Harnoor, go ahead.
Yeah, everything you said just hit so close to home. Oh my god. Like, I mean, I'm a bit of like a psych nerd, right? And so like what you were talking about with like, you sort of get stuck in these patterns. It's like those like neural pathways when you sort of constantly talk like in your internal monologue to yourself like that, they get stronger, right? And so then it just becomes natural for your brain, like it just falls into the pattern of talking to yourself like that. And so people like think that like affirmations, like a lot of the time it's like, I'm so smart, my brain can do all these amazing things. Obviously, it can't be reprogrammed. Yeah, it can. It's just like a funky little machine, right? And so, like, affirmations seem hokey and stuff, but like you're actually like reprogramming the way that your brain naturally falls, like when it thinks about stuff, right? Like the
Right.
decisions that you make subconsciously.
Something that I think was helpful for me to recognize is our brains have, from an evolutionary standpoint, different parts of us have evolved, first, second, and more recently. And so there are very ancient parts of ourselves that are purely about survival. And when that threat response is switched on, it will affect your nervous system, your cognitive abilities, and at the heart of it, your body is doing something really profound and impressive. It is finding ways to keep you alive. Now, the truth of the matter is, in our modern day society, sometimes we're actually in a dangerous situation, but a lot of times our bodies get activated and stressed, and yet we're not actually in as threatening of a situation as our bodies seem to be reacting to. And in those moments, I like to remember that there's there's nothing, your body's actually doing a really great thing. It just now gets to have some new information to help remind it, hey, we don't have to only operate that way anymore. We can introduce this technique or take this moment to reset and reframe how you view the situation, so you can see you're actually safe, you're actually okay. And if there is a real problem, of course you can address it, but from a more rational place, not just the survival state. So, there's no real use in us being hard on ourselves for doing the thing of survival. It's more so, how can we now bring that part of our beings to the more developed parts of our reasoning, and be able to say, okay, what's really going on, and how can we approach this in a way where, like, yeah, we feel like we can move forward healthfully. So that was really helpful for me, because I used to be really hard on myself for dealing with negative thoughts. And then I remembered, oh, no, 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 of course your body is trying to locate the threat. It's literally scanning to make sure you're not in danger right now. So now that you know you're not in danger, let's check in. What are those thoughts you've been repeating? Okay, now let's start to explore new stories. And I promise you, affirmations are something I've actually used for many years, and they have made a significant difference in my daily experience, in my relationships, in my career choices. So you just have to find the affirmations or the mantras or the statements that feel uniquely personal and helpful for you. For me, if I just read a general list of, like, I am powerful, I am unstoppable, I am great, that doesn't quite reach the part of me that feels more inspired if I say, okay, in the past, I've been really nervous in new settings around new people. So I'm in this moment going to use the affirmation, I am at ease and confident in new situations. I am at ease and confident speaking to new people. Like, that's so specific to my experience, so it feels a little bit more potent. So I have affirmation albums, and tons of, like, affirmation related things that you can find, and you just, like, click the topic that feels like, oh, that's what I'm going through right now, and just let them play them while you're sleeping. Like, don't even make it a big deal, just let it be going throughout the day, and then over time check in and say, like, do I notice a difference? And if not, like, maybe adjust the affirmation, you know
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's like I the thing that I like to say, it's like we're using like a stone age piece of machinery in the digital age, right? So like a lot of stuff, it's like when you get really nervous, your heart starts like beating and you feel yourself like really starting to like shake, and it's because your body wants to run because it thinks something is chasing you, right? And so you have to be like, okay, nothing is chasing me, don't
right,
worry, you know?
totally.
And yeah, and like I think such a huge part of like managing the physical symptoms of stress is understanding why they happen, right? And I think that's true for a lot of stuff, is like if you understand why something is happening, the root cause of something, it's so much easier to address. um like like I know what my body wants to do. My body wants to move right now, so maybe I will. Like maybe that's just like how I'm going to release stress, right? And this, it's like the same thing for what you said about affirmations too. Like I've, I use like things that I say to myself to like calm myself down. I think one of the big ones I use is like every other time in the past that I have been nervous about something like this, like because usually it's like a really small thing and then I get worked up over it. It's like it's been nothing, right? Like it's worked itself out. So like why would I believe that it wouldn't do that this time? And then I told that to a friend of mine and then he was like, not helpful at all. I was like, okay, so it's a very personal
Totally.
experience, like what helps me isn't going to help somebody else. But yeah, like you were saying about movement genius, like it's a very tailored sort of approach to everybody's mental health because everybody's mind is unique.
Right.
um yeah. And okay, again, 180-degree turn. So I talked a little bit in your intro about the coming out essay that you wrote, which, in case our audience is unaware, you chose to come out publicly in an essay that you wrote yourself, which was published, I believe, in Teen Vogue. And I highly recommend that everyone go read it because it is like a very, like, if you're a queer person or even if you're not, it's like a very, very relatable, very wonderful story. And I personally, however, have seen like several stories of public figures who have been outed before they were ready, and even in my personal life, like I've known other queer people who maybe have come out to one person and then, the other person, maybe not even on purpose, has like outed them to other people. And I was wondering, when you chose to write the story, were you afraid that it would happen to you? And why do you think that it was so important that you wrote your own story rather than having it be a press release or something else written by somebody else? Why was it important for you to put it in your own words?
Yeah, a lot of layers there. So at the time, I was dating a woman and privately, and I've always been pretty private about my relational life. However, it was having an impact on her, and she wasn't feeling safe to express her love and care when we went to the store or went to the park. And that kind of secrecy bred really, negative experiences for our relationship. And I asked myself, like, who am I protecting here? And I realized I was protecting the homophobic ideology more than I was protecting the person I loved. And there are so many parts of me, especially at that time, that still had internalized homophobic tendencies and lots of fear and, confusion and conflicting beliefs. So I just reached a point where I knew that if I wanted to show up as a supportive partner, I was going to need to embrace this in a more public way. And, you know, I, I knew that being in the public eye, a lot of times people just assume you're doing things for attention. And I knew that people might talk about this being my attempt to be back in the news or to try and revive my career by saying this interesting fact about my sexuality. And in reality, I just didn't want to risk answering a question to a reporter and then seeing it misrepresented in the final article. And so it was that moment where I kind of knew, like, oh, this is going to be challenging and some emotionally taxing nights with the pen to paper, but I can't imagine doing it any other way. Like, I've got to put this into my words so that it's on the record, and that if the outlet decides to change something, I have proof and documentation. And, it just felt so sacred. I couldn't imagine someone else's mouth telling my story, even though it was nerve wracking to actually come forward and do it. But it's fun to revisit now, years later, and be able to feel proud of that version of myself. And, I didn't grow up often saying things like, I'm proud of you to myself. And now I look back and even in the present, and I'm like, whoa, you're really showing up. Like, maybe I should be so surprised. You're consistently showing up. Good on you. Of course, I'm a work in progress or art in progress, however you want to define it. Um, but that article I think was one of the first moments I realized that not only does the story matter to share, but that people want to hear it directly from the source. And because it came straight from me, or or not so straight, pansexually from me, I was able to then have really amazing conversations with people one on one about their experiences. And, I ended up doing that again later. I performed at the VMAs, and, some people were like, tell us what it was like to be back on stage after 20 years or whatever it was. And I said to my team, we wrote one viral article, and I would like to call dibs on this one as well. And it ended up being viral again. And I was able to talk about the mental health techniques I used before going on stage. Now, if someone else would have interviewed me, they would have been focused on other things like the fame of it and, tell us about the fandom and how much attention you got after. And instead, I was able to be like, hey, by the way, in order to get through a live performance in front of millions of people after not doing that for years, I had to meditate and use this stress relief technique because I'm human, and it made, that successful performance possible. And so I love the power that we have to highlight the topics we want to discuss more, and also just set aside the things that are really just kind of, in my opinion, not really helpful to dwell on. So, that's, I feel like, the power of the written word, of verbal communication, of, claiming your story, your identity as your own and sharing it. Yes, it's a bit much at first because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm putting myself out there. But hopefully, over time, you get to experience that liberation and also the sense of being able to find people who relate to it on a really deep, true level. With relationships, with career, and all these things, I used to like never let myself be seen authentically because I was afraid you might not like what you find out. If you really knew me, you might not like it. And I realized that in order for me to actually be able to feel deep love and acceptance and belonging, I'm going to have to let someone see the real me. And, you know, yes, it can be a little nerve wracking at first, but it's so worth it. And that's my hope for everyone with their story, whether they're writing an article or just sending a text to a loved one. Like, you deserve to feel safe and comfortable and confident in who you are, and to find people who celebrate every ounce, and who also support you in healing the parts of you that are, a little more jagged edges or like still recovering from past pains and wounds.
That's amazing. And I really think that since Novelly is all about like read to heal, that's also very resonant with us and our community. And I think thank you for just like before we move on, I just wanted to say thank you for like sharing this with us and for being able to talk about your process and your health and your experience with us, because I know that it's helpful to me personally as a young person, and I know that it will definitely be helpful to many other youth. um, and we've just really been enjoying this conversation overall, and we are now going to move on to asking you some rapid fire questions. So my first question to you is like, if you were into writing when you were younger, what's some advice that you would give to your younger, or even just like a couple years ago, writing self?
Hmm. So I like to write. When I first started writing, it was poetry and lyrics. And then as I've gotten older, I actually like doing research papers and like essays on a particular topic. So for some reason, I haven't really ever delved into writing fiction or creating like characters and plot and story. Um, so I think for for this chapter of my writing, I would I would encourage myself as a writer um, to look for more sources of inspiration from other writers to actually broaden the kind of material I'm consuming, and to really like study and enjoy the process of dissecting all these different ways of telling a story or communicating a thought, and really lean into crafting my preferred voicing of topics. Um, right now, I still feel like it can come across as a generic report when I do my first and second and third draft. So I think I would encourage myself in real time to consider, what is my unique voice? What are the ways that I tend to communicate in real life that are most effective for people? And how can I highlight those and make them juicier and make them even more impactful? Because I think that's when you start to be able to pick up a book and recognize, like, oh, I know this author. I may not know their name, but I recognize how they're writing. Like, that to me is so cool. Same with musicians, where I'm like, I know your voice just by how you pronounced that word. Like, you have really honed your craft. So I think I would say that, yeah, just broaden the inspiration, and then like let that help you shape and hone your specific voice. Do you have any
Yeah, that's.
advice? What would you say?
I mean, I think we're both writers, me and Eve. I I think I would say like I think I hold myself back because I think that it needs to be perfect. Like I I found like an old journal for when I was younger, and I really wanted to look through it, and then so many pages had been ripped out because I was like, no, this is embarrassing. And it's like, no, your older self really wants to see what you've written, and like even if you might look back on it in the future and think it's embarrassing, like it's important that you are still able to look back on it. So I think just don't let anything hold yourself back from writing. Like even if you think it might come out like, bad, it's like you got to be bad before you're good.
I totally agree with that. Like, always get that first draft in. To my younger self, I definitely like. I I think I would tell myself to write more of what I love, because I think a lot of times my first writing always started like with school, and I grew to love it. Like, I love writing. It's a form of, it helps me both escape and then also like be more attached to my reality. Like, it's something that's really close to me. Um, and a lot of times I worry about like what my reader, even if it was just like my third grade teacher, would like or would think about it. And I think writing for me would be my best piece of advice.
That's good. That's something you brought up, something just about us being creative and like trying to get it right on the first try. What's interesting is that the literal process of creating something from nothing includes uncertainty and not knowing what you're doing. Like, we as creatives, whether we're formally creative or just a creative human designing our life every day, like, we have to embrace the mystery and, not knowing how to do something correctly or whatever up front, because that's literally the creative process. So it helps me remember that the mess of it is a step in being creative, and there's like time and space to totally let that like be your first attempt. I mean, my first draft, I'm about to give a keynote in a week, and today I'm doing a whole revamp because my first draft I went back and revisited and I was like, this is so dry. Like, I would fall asleep listening to this, but I at least got like some main points that I want to make. And then today I thought, okay, what's this story you really want to tell? And I even went on YouTube and like watched some videos on speech writing because I was like, you know what? I need to be reminded about some of these outlines and, principles that you can follow that will actually help. Like, you know, listen to the people who know what they're talking about. Like, you don't have to figure this all out on your own. I'm a big fan of YouTube University. Big fan.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the scariest thing is like the blank page. And if you just get a first draft down, even though it's scary, like it's so much easier to like shape words that exist than to just like create something completely new. Right. And, I think the blank page is just like terrifying, but then just put something down and then it's so much easier to work with. It's like slowly chipping away at a sculpture, you know? And sort of like on the same note of your writing process, while you were writing your books, what was your favorite part of writing? And, what was something that you maybe like didn't expect when you were writing a book, something that you struggled with a little bit? I'm not like a nonfiction writer a lot of the time, so I'm really interested to see like the different challenges of writing nonfiction.
So I love, love, love the research up front. I can get stuck on the research hamster wheel forever if I don't give myself a deadline. Like, you do need to deliver this manuscript by the end of the month, so you might as well start writing something. So I do love research. I will say that when I just do a stream of consciousness draft, my particular habit is that I end up taking longer than if I would have just outlined it and given it a skeleton and, a general pathway of A to Z. So I've learned that in order to help my writing and to be more efficient, it's really important for me to craft that outline in advance. And I was working on a tight timeline. A lot of times people take a couple of years to write a book. I had 3 months, I believe. And that's including, concept to final draft when you've gone and reread it 1,200 times and you're just trying to say, okay, it's ready enough to go. And I stayed on a schedule where I would write one chapter each week. And setting up those structures actually allowed more room for the creativity to flow. So that's something that I've learned is finding your ideal balance of structure and freedom in your creative process. If I don't give myself a deadline or like a goal, or lay things out in steps, a lot of times my creative process will just feel so muddy and ideas will swirl and I won't really know how to get them out into concrete things, ideas, projects, whatever. So, that's the structure that's helpful. Now, if I become too rigid with my structure, then I don't even give myself permission to like dance with ideas or try to maybe find a different point that I haven't yet thought of. And my writing tends to become really narrow and it starts to sound redundant because I'm just saying the same thing over and over. So for me, I think finding that ideal relationship between structure and freedom is super important. And even just how you schedule your day. Like, I used to write for 8 hours in a row. Now I know, pause, go outside, allow your brain to reset for a moment, and then come back and, find your flow again. And that I think, you just have to like really listen to your creative process and stay ahead of those moments of hitting writer's block. Like, you start to notice the patterns, like, oh, I usually hit writer's block when A, B, and C. And so then you're like, okay, what can I do to make an adjustment so that I can kind of stay in the zone? Because when you have a deadline like 3 months, it's like you either are going to hit that or not. So, yeah, I think it was a fun challenge, and I definitely tend to be like way too wordy. So I have to usually let myself over explain a point, like I'm doing right now, and then go back and simplify and be like, okay, you could have summarized all of that in one simpler sentence. So yeah, that's a little bit of my process. But I'm open to learning your favorite tools for writing as well.
That's amazing. And that's all like really important too. Like the research part is always super big. And then also like those structures, that is a big thing for me too, personally. Um, and it really helps my process, and also just like being able to really and fully connect to my writing or my book. And I actually sometimes do the same thing when I'm just reading books.
Yeah.
Um, Having a set schedule to like, okay, this month I finished this book. It doesn't take the fun out of it, which is nice, but it also like reminds me to read and like get into that, because it's like a coping mechanism for me. It's good for my mental health. It's reading, so like it's great. And kind of along those lines, since as I mentioned, we at Novelly, we read to heal, what's a book that you've read that has changed your life, or even just on a smaller scale has helped you change things or heal things or parts of your own book?
I'm looking at my bookshelf here. So, oh, there are so many. I wish I could think of all of them right now. One that's more practical, it's more of a workbook. It's by Dr. Manuela Mishka Reeds, I believe her name is, and it's a somatic toolkit, where you can try all of these different mind body exercises that help with, specific challenges. So it makes sense that I wrote a book that has activities and journal prompts and interactive components, because I really like reading to feel like an experience and not just, adding more information upstairs, for it to really be digested and internalized and lead to a deep embodied transformation. Um, so I tend to read things that, pertain to psychology or neuroscience, or sociology. And I think for me, a lot of that is because I grew up playing roles in films and shows, and my whole career and livelihood were dedicated to fantasy. And so when I read in my personal time, I'm like, give me what is really going on in the real world, and like tell me the facts, and like I don't want to see the plot develop. I just want to know the conclusion already. Like, what is the point and what am I supposed to learn? So I'm like pretty practical. But if I think of any other specific books, I'll share them, because for me, like, reading really was one of the main ways that I went about taking care of myself and learning about the world. Like, I was working so much, and then I didn't really have a lot of peers my age. So I would learn from authors as if they were my friends. So, they don't know this, but they've been mentoring me my whole life.
Oh, that's the best. I love like books are everything, truly. I mean, you got us at Novelty. So a massive thank you to our lovely Alyson for being here, and for our podcast listeners, we have a special offer from the Movement Genius team. If you visit movementgenius.com/novelly, you will get a free copy of Alyson's book and 1 month of access to the Movement Genius platform, which is what I will be doing in about 5 minutes. And to learn more about our work here on Novelly, be sure to check us out at novelly.org. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much, Alyson, for having this conversation with us.
Thank you. Nice chatting with both of you, and I'll see you all at Movement Genius.